The radiator in apartment 4C had been broken since October. Daniel Mercer knew this, the way he knew everything about the building, not from a report or a work order, but from the cold that crept under the door each morning when he came to fix it. He'd been the building's maintenance man for 6 years. He knew which pipes groaned before a freeze. He knew which elevator button needed a firm second press. He knew every scar on every wall. He knew his own apartment the same way. The gap under the kitchen window where the draft came through. The loose floorboard near the hallway closet that he'd promised himself he'd fix for 3 years. The shelf above the radiator where Lily kept her books stacked sideways, 2 rows deep, because she'd run out of room. She was 8 years old, and she'd already run out of room. He was making coffee when she appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was dressed in her school clothes, dark jeans, a gray sweater, her sneakers already tied. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back the way he'd shown her, though a few strands had escaped, and she hadn't noticed or hadn't cared. She was holding a library book. She was always holding a library book, and she was reading it while she walked, which was a habit he'd given up trying to correct. "Morning," he said. She looked up. "Morning. Can I come with you today?" It was a Saturday. He had a full day at the Hargrove building, a 22-story office tower in the financial district. 6 hours of contracted maintenance work that his boss Philip had scheduled before Christmas. Lily had an arrangement with Mrs. Dunleavy down the hall on weekdays, but Saturdays were different. Saturdays were harder. "You'll be bored," he said. "I won't." He looked at her. She was already looking back at the book. He'd stopped arguing with her about things like this. She was usually right. "Get your coat," he said. She was already going to get it. He drove them through the city in his work truck, the kind with tool compartments welded along the sides, and a permanent smell of WD-40 and rubber seals. Lily sat in the passenger seat with her seatbelt on, and her book open on her lap. Outside, the January streets were the color of old paper gray buildings, gray sky. The sidewalks still faintly dirty from a snow that had come and gone without distinction. She turned a page. "What are you reading?" he asked. She held up the cover without looking at him. "The Complete History of Chess. Strategies, Masters, and Endgames. 3rd edition." He recognized it. He'd seen it before on the shelf, in her bag, tucked under her pillow. She'd had it for 2 weeks, which meant she'd read it at least 3 times by now. He kept his eyes on the road. "Put it away," he said. Quietly. Not angry. Just quiet. She looked at him then. Not hurt, exactly. More like the look she got when she encountered a problem she didn't fully understand yet, and was working through it methodically. "Why?" she asked. The same question she always asked. "Just put it away, Lily." She put it in her bag, but she didn't say anything else, and he could feel her watching the side of his face for the rest of the drive. The way she always did when she was adding something to the long, careful list of things she was trying to figure out about him. She'd been adding to that list since she was 4. He'd never played chess with her. That was the strange thing, the thing she'd noticed before she was old enough to name it. He wasn't a man who refused things lightly. He let her stay up late to finish chapters. He let her ask difficult questions at the dinner table, the kind that made other adults shift in their seats. He'd let her fail her way through her first 2 years of swimming lessons without stepping in, because she'd told him she wanted to figure it out herself. And he'd respected that. But the chess set, the old wooden one that lived in the closet on the top shelf, pushed to the back behind the spare blankets, that was different. She'd found it when she was 5, dragging a chair over to look for her rain boots. She'd brought it down carefully, set it on the kitchen table, opened the board. 12 of the pieces were original. The others were replacements in slightly different wood, slightly different weight. She'd noticed the difference immediately. He'd come in from the hallway and stopped completely. "Put that back," he'd said. Not loud, not angry. Just absolutely certain. She'd looked at him for a long moment, then put it back. But she'd remembered. She'd been remembering ever since. 3 years later, she'd started taking chess books out of the library. He'd seen the first one and said nothing. He'd seen the second one and said nothing. By the 5th one, he'd understood that saying nothing was itself a kind of permission, and that she was, with great patience and characteristic precision, working her way towards something. He just didn't know what to do about that. The Hargrove Building's lobby was the kind of space that cost more to maintain than Daniel made in a year. 40-foot ceilings. A floor of pale limestone that showed every scuff and had to be buffed twice weekly. 2 massive reception desks in brushed bronze, and in the far corner, near the waiting area for executive visitors, an oversized chessboard decorative, mostly, the squares inlaid directly into the floor, the pieces carved from some dark stone that he'd never been able to identify. He'd been working in this building for 8 months. He'd walked past that board maybe 200 times. He'd never looked directly at it. Lily stopped walking. He turned. She was standing at the edge of the waiting area, still wearing her coat, her bag on her shoulder, looking at the board with the expression she got when something interested her, completely not excited. Exactly. More like focused. Like a camera finding its subject. "Come on," he said. "It's a Sicilian defense setup," she said. "Look at the pawns." Someone arranged them in a specific opening. He looked at the board. He didn't know what she was talking about. He'd made sure of that, made sure he never learned the vocabulary, the patterns, the names. If he didn't speak the language, he couldn't be drawn in. Lily, whoever set this up knows what they're doing. That's a very specific choice for a lobby display. It's not decorative. It's a statement. She tilted her head slightly. Or maybe it's a challenge. "Lily." His voice was flat now. "We're here to work. I need you to sit in the maintenance office and read your books." "And, Mr. Mercer." The voice came from behind him. He turned. She was 36. She looked younger, and also somehow older, the kind of person whose age became irrelevant the moment she walked into a room, replaced by something harder to quantify. Composure, maybe. Or authority so practiced it had become involuntary. Victoria Hale was the CEO of Hargrove Capital. She'd taken the position at 31, after the previous CEO's rather spectacular public collapse, and she'd rebuilt the company's reputation in 3 years. The financial press called her a precision instrument. Her employees called her various things depending on the floor and whether they thought they were being overheard. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, dark trousers, her dark hair pulled back. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee, which surprised him. He'd half expected an assistant to materialize from somewhere with a tray. She handed one to the security guard at the desk, who looked mildly astonished. Then she looked at Lily. Lily was still studying the board. She hadn't looked up. "She's right," Victoria said. "It's a Sicilian defense opening. My assistant set it up last week. He's been trying to challenge me for months." A pause. "He hasn't succeeded." Lily looked up then. For a moment the two of them regarded each other across the chessboard, the 8-year-old in the gray sweater and the CEO in the charcoal blazer, and something passed between them that Daniel couldn't name. "I'm Daniel Mercer," he said quickly. "Maintenance contractor. I've got a full-day service schedule today, the HVAC on 15, the plumbing call on 7, and the exterior lock. I know your schedule, Mr. Mercer." Victoria hadn't looked away from Lily. "What's your name?" Lily told her. "Do you play?" Daniel moved between them. Not dramatically, just a step. A small repositioning of himself in the space. "She's 8, he said. "She's here with me, and she'll be in my work area. You don't need to. I'm asking her." Victoria said, still calm, still precise. Her eyes finally moved to his face. "You can object in a moment." It wasn't rude. It was simply exact. He found he had nothing to say. Lily looked at her father. He saw it in her face, not asking for permission, exactly. She'd already decided. She was checking on him, making sure he was all right. 8 years old. He looked away first. "Sit down, Lily," he said. 5 minutes. She was already moving toward the board. Victoria set her coffee on the side table and took the seat across from her. The security guard watched with the mild interest of someone who has learned not to be surprised by anything. 2 women from the marketing team who'd been crossing the lobby slowed, then stopped entirely. Lily looked at the board for a long moment. She didn't touch anything. "White moves first," Victoria said. "I know." Lily reached out and moved a pawn. Not the pawn you'd expect. Not the safe opening. The standard textbook first step. She moved the queen's knight pawn one specific square with a deliberateness that seemed disproportionate to the size of her hand. She set it down. She put her hands in her lap. And then nothing happened. Daniel watched Victoria Hale's face. He saw the moment it changed. It was like watching a current go out, the composure, the precision, the carefully maintained temperature of her expression. All of it. Gone. Her hand, halfway to her own piece, stopped moving. It just stopped. She stared at the board. The coffee cup in her other hand tipped. She didn't notice. It hit the limestone floor and cracked, and the coffee spread in a slow, dark arc across the pale stone. And she didn't look at it. She was staring at the board. Who taught you that? Her voice was different. Lower. Stripped of something, Lily looked at her, steady and very still. My mom. Victoria Hale looked up. Her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the lobby's recessed lighting. Your mother, she said. Not a question. The lobby was quiet. The marketing women had gone. The security guard was looking at the spilled coffee. Daniel stood very still near the wall. And he felt the particular weight of a thing he had been carrying for 4 years. Finally not dropping, exactly, but shifting. Acknowledging that it had been there all along. He watched Victoria's face. She knew. Or she was beginning to know. And the knowing was doing something to her that the precision and the composure couldn't contain. 10 years ago, the chess world had a name for Margaret Slade. Not Mercer, she'd taken his name when they married. 2 years after the tournament circuit ended for her. But before that she'd been Margaret Slade. And Margaret Slade had been 22 years old, ranked in the top 40 players in the country, and had beaten the reigning national amateur champion in a tournament in Boston that became, for a brief and intense season, something people talked about. Victoria Hale had been that champion. She'd been 26. Just beginning to establish herself in the financial sector, still playing competitively, still carrying the reputation she'd been building since college. Margaret Slade had beaten her in the semi-final, and then in the final, and then in the exhibition match that technically hadn't mattered. She'd beaten her with patience and originality, with openings no one had seen before, with endgames that took opponents apart so gently they didn't realize what had happened until the king was already fallen. The queen's knight pawn opening was Margaret's. She'd invented it, or assembled it, really, from patterns and intuitions no one else had thought to combine. It wasn't in any book. It wouldn't appear in any book until Margaret was gone, because she'd never written it down. She'd only played it. And she'd only played it against Victoria Hale. What happened after was more complicated than betrayal, and less clean than accident. Victoria had been recruited to Hargrove Capital that autumn, and her new position came with visibility she hadn't had before. A journalist had profiled her a flattering piece, long and carefully constructed, and in it, she'd spoken about her chess career, with what she later described as appropriate candor. She'd mentioned a specific tournament. She'd described a specific defeat. She hadn't named Margaret Slade. She hadn't needed to. The chess community was small, and the profile was widely read, and the context made the identification obvious to anyone who'd been there. What the article said, in the careful and deniable language that could always be read 2 ways, was that her opponent in that tournament had been erratic, unpredictable, talented but emotionally inconsistent, a player who won brilliantly and lost catastrophically, and couldn't always be trusted to show up the same way twice. It was the kind of language that followed a person. Margaret Slade had been trying to arrange a coaching arrangement with the National Youth Chess Program that followed a position she'd spent months working toward, one that would have given her income and legitimacy and a path forward. The program director read the article. He made a phone call to someone who'd been at the Boston tournament. The arrangement fell through. 2 more doors closed, then a third. By the following spring, Margaret had left competitive chess entirely. By the time she married Daniel, she hadn't played in 18 months. She'd packed the set into the closet, and she'd told him, quietly and without dramatics, that she was done, that it was better this way, that she wanted to be someone who used to play chess, not someone who couldn't stop mourning that she no longer did. He'd believed her because he'd wanted to, because she was luminous and warm, and she made the small apartment feel larger than it was, and because love makes optimists of us all. She died 4 years ago, in November, of a brain aneurysm. She was 32. Lily was 4. She was there when she went to sleep, and not there when Lily woke up. "How old is the game?" Victoria asked. She meant the opening. She was still looking at the board, but differently now, the way you look at something you've spent years trying to forget and have never entirely managed. Lily didn't answer immediately. "She showed me," Lily said. "Before she got sick. I was little, but I remembered." A pause. "She showed me this move and she said, 'This one is yours, when you're ready.' She said I'd know when." Daniel pressed his back against the wall. He was watching his daughter. He'd known she remembered. He'd known, without being told, that Margaret had done something like this, left something behind in the place she knew Lily would find it. He'd thought, for 4 years, that if he kept the board out of reach, and the books off the shelves, and the language unspoken, Lily would eventually move past it. Move into something that was entirely her own. He'd been wrong about that. He understood it now, watching her sit across from Victoria Hale with perfect composure. Her small hands in her lap. Her face as steady as Margaret's had always been, at a board. He hadn't been protecting Lily. He'd been protecting himself. Victoria stood up from the table. She walked 2 steps and stood at the edge of the board looking down at it, and her face was doing something complicated that required all the self-discipline she had to contain. "I need to ask you something," she said to Daniel. He waited. "The journalist who wrote that profile. Did Margaret ever see it?" He said nothing. "Did she?" Victoria stopped, started again. "Did she know it was me?" "Yes," he said. "She knew." Victoria closed her eyes briefly. "Did she tell you to?" She gestured at the board. "The lobby. The morning. Did she plan this?" He almost laughed. Not with amusement, with something closer to grief and recognition combined. "Margaret didn't plan things that far ahead," he said. "She taught Lily an opening. She told her it would mean something, that's all she could give her." A pause. "The rest is just Lily." "The match was Lily's idea. Or rather," she asked. And Victoria didn't say no. Which, as Daniel had learned over several hours in the Hargrove building, was usually how Victoria Hale agreed to things. They cleared the decorative pieces and set up a proper game. Word moved through the building the way it always does in quiet places when something worth watching begins a murmur on the executive floor. A security alert that turned out to be 3 assistants and a VP gathering near the lobby elevators. By noon, there were 14 people watching from what everyone pretended was a respectful distance. Lily played slowly. Not hesitantly slowly. There was a difference, and the people who knew chess understood it. She was seeing farther than she was letting on. She was making choices that looked simple and turning out not to be. Victoria played exactly as she always played. Precisely, analytically. With the controlled force of someone who had spent 30 years learning to make the board do what she wanted. She didn't condescend. She didn't hold back. After the 4th move, she stopped holding back entirely, and the game became something real. Daniel stood near the entrance and watched. He hadn't watched Lily play before. He hadn't let himself. And now he understood with the specific helplessness of a father who has miscalculated that she was extraordinary, not prodigy level, maybe. Not yet. She was 8 and self-taught from books, and from a handful of sessions he was only now beginning to understand the scope of, but she played with a quality he recognized even without the vocabulary to name it. She played the way Margaret had played. Not the same openings, not the same patterns, she was too young for that, too early in the process, but the same quality of attention, the same stillness before a move. The same unhurried certainty. She played like someone who understood that chess was a conversation, not a conquest. The game lasted 40 minutes. Lily moved her knight. It was the 13th move. It looked to the people watching, and perhaps even to Victoria for one brief second, like a mistake, a knight placed where it seemed vulnerable, exposed, without obvious backup. Victoria looked at it. The room went very quiet. Victoria looked at it for a long time. "Your mother played this exact position," she said quietly. Barely audible. "In Boston. On the 16th move." Lily nodded. "You're 2 moves early." "I know." Lily put her hand back in her lap. "She taught me to compress the sequence. She said the vulnerability was the point. That people don't trust something that looks too safe." Victoria set down the piece she'd been holding. She looked at the board. She looked at Lily. "She was right," she said. And then, in a voice so quiet, it barely traveled across the table, "She was always right." What happened next was not dramatic in the way of movies or of stories that want to be tidy. Victoria Hale did not weep loudly. She did not stand and speak. She sat very still at the table, and her eyes went bright, and her jaw tightened, and for a long moment she was simply a 36-year-old woman sitting across from an 8-year-old who had just played her dead mother's chess. One person in the gathered crowd shifted. Someone else looked away. Daniel didn't look away. He watched Victoria Hale understand what she had done 10 years ago, in 800 words of careful and deniable prose. He watched her understand it fully, perhaps for the first time, not as an abstraction, not as a decision she'd made when she was 26 and ambitious and afraid of being overshadowed, but as a real thing, with a real shape, that had real consequences for a real person. He watched her sit with it. He didn't feel what he'd expected to feel. He'd been angry, quietly and privately, for years, not consumed by it, not the kind of man to be consumed, but it had been there, a low persistent heat. And now, watching her face, the anger didn't vanish, but it changed. It became something more like sorrow. The same quality of grief, pointed in a different direction. He thought, Margaret would have known what to do with this. He thought, I don't, but maybe Lily does. She asked everyone to leave. It wasn't a request, exactly. It was the kind of thing she said in a room when she needed it to happen, and it happened. The VP and the assistants and the security guard drifted away with the practiced discretion of people who had learned to read her tone. Even the spilled coffee had been cleaned up by then, the limestone buffed back to its cold shine. She asked Daniel to stay. He stayed. He sat in the chair beside Lily, who was resetting the pieces on the board with careful, methodical fingers. Victoria sat across from them both. She still had the controlled stillness, but the precision of it was different, now less armored. I want to tell you what I did, she said. Not as a defense. There isn't one. He watched her. The journalist's profile, I didn't write it. But I was the source. He asked me about the tournament circuit, and I said things I knew could be read a certain way. I told myself at the time that I was just answering honestly, that I hadn't invented anything. A pause. That was a lie I told myself for a long time. Lily put a rook down carefully in its square. I was afraid of her, Victoria said. Not personally, professionally. She played in a way I couldn't counter. I'd been the best in my cohort for 4 years, and she came in from nowhere, and she was better. And I was building something. I was in the middle of building something, and she felt like a threat. She stopped. That's the honest version. It's not a good one. No, Daniel said. It's not. Did she? Victoria's voice shifted slightly. Did she ever try to return to competitive play? After? No. He was quiet for a moment. She said it was fine. She was the kind of person who said things like that, and mostly meant them. She found other things. A pause. She was good at teaching. She spent the last 2 years of her life teaching Lily. Lily looked up at him. He met her eyes. He didn't look away this time. I didn't know about Lily, Victoria said. I know. I didn't know she'd gotten married. I lost track. I told myself I lost track because it was easier than admitting I'd made a decision to lose track. She put both hands flat on the table. I don't know what I'm asking for. I don't think I'm asking for anything. You're not, Daniel said. And I'm not giving you anything. This isn't that kind of conversation. Victoria nodded once. A small, precise motion. What I would like, she said carefully, is to know that Lily plays, that she's allowed to play. She looked at him when she said it. Not accusingly. just directly. The way she did everything. He thought of the closet shelf, the chess set pushed to the back. He thought of the library books he'd told Lily to put away, and the question she always asked, why, and the answer he'd never been able to give her, because the real answer was, because I can't watch you be her without missing her. And I haven't been brave enough to bear it. He looked at his daughter. She had put the last piece, the white queen, in its starting position. She was looking at the board. And then she looked up at him, and her expression was the one that never failed to undo him. Patient. Waiting. Trusting that he would figure it out eventually. She plays, he said. Lily had been quiet through most of it. This wasn't unusual. She processed things internally first and spoke when she had something complete to offer. It was one of the many ways she was exactly like her mother. Now she spoke. "Can I ask you something?" she said to Victoria. Victoria looked at her. "Yes. Did you know, when you said those things, that it would close the doors? Or did you just not care what would happen?" It was the most direct question in the room. It had the quality of Margaret, the kind of chess question that looked like a straightforward inquiry, but was actually, if you played it out, something much more pointed. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I think," she said, very carefully, "that I allowed myself not to know, which is worse than not knowing." Lily considered this. "My mom used to say that the hardest moves are the ones where you have all the information and you choose not to use it." Victoria closed her eyes briefly. "That sounds like her," she said. And for the first time, the careful control slipped entirely. And her voice had the quality of someone speaking through something rather than around it. "I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it's not enough. I'm saying it anyway." Lily looked at her for a long time. She wasn't unhappy, Lily said. "I want you to know that." She got happy in a different way than she expected. She had my dad and she had me and she taught me everything she knew about chess and she said it was enough. A pause. 8-year-old precise. "She also said some things are unfair and you don't have to pretend they're not. So I'm not going to pretend it's not unfair, but I don't think she would want me to only tell you the unfair part." Victoria looked at Daniel. He didn't say anything. He was looking at his daughter. This was Margaret's gift. He understood now. Not the chess opening, not the tactical inheritance, the encoded patterns, the brilliant compressed sequence that had made an executive's face crack open in a lobby. The gift was this: a child who could hold two true things at once without letting one destroy the other. Margaret had known she was leaving. Not in the way people sometimes claim to know, dramatically and poetically, but in the quiet, practical way of a person who understood risk and probability and the fragility of human tissue. She'd had the headaches. She'd had the strange, blurring moments. The days when the world's edges went soft. She'd known before the doctors told her, and she'd used the time she had with a kind of efficiency that was itself a form of love. She'd taught Lily chess. She'd taught her the opening. She'd said, "This one is yours. When you're ready, you'll know when." She'd taught her, too, how to be angry and generous at the same time. She'd left Lily everything she needed. The winter afternoon came early, the way January afternoons always do in that city, the light dropping out of the sky around 4, the streets going gray and orange in the lamplight. Daniel finished his maintenance work at 5:30. He found Lily in the executive waiting area, still at the chess table, working through a problem in a book she'd pulled from her bag. She'd moved through her whole day, the morning drive, the lobby, the conversation, and arrived here, reading, focused, perfectly ordinary. He stood watching her for a moment. "Ready?" he said. "Almost." She moved a bookmark and closed the book. "Victoria gave me her card. She said she has a colleague who runs a youth chess program. She said, if you said it was okay, she'd like to arrange for me to meet them." He sat down in the chair across from her. "Does she need an answer now?" "No." She said, "Take your time." Lily put the book in her bag. Then she looked at him the way she sometimes looked at him, carefully, but without agenda. "Are you okay?" "Getting there," he said. She nodded as though this was a satisfactory answer. It was the kind of answer Margaret had always accepted from him, not fully arrived at yet, but moving, directionally sound. "I knew you'd get there." Lily said. He reached across the table and rearranged two of the chess pieces she'd been using. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know the game. He'd made sure of that, but he moved the pieces anyway, just to touch them, just to handle a thing he'd been afraid to touch for 4 years. Did she teach you anything else? He asked. That I don't know about? Lily tilted her head slightly. Lots of things. Yeah. She said you'd be ready to hear them eventually. He laughed. It surprised him, the sound of it. Quiet and real. In the empty lobby of a building he'd been maintaining for 8 months, without ever really seeing. She was usually right, he said. Always, Lily said. She was always right. He stood up. She stood up. They picked up their things, his toolbox, her bag, the coat she'd draped over the back of the chair, and crossed the lobby toward the exit. He held the door for her. Outside, the city was cold and lit and ongoing, the way cities are, indifferent and busy with its own concerns. She walked beside him. I want to learn properly, she said. Not just from books. I know. Will you learn too? He didn't answer immediately. He thought about the closet shelf, the set pushed to the back. He thought about Margaret at the kitchen table in the apartment, teaching a 4-year-old girl to hold a piece and place it and let it go. Maybe, he said. That means yes, Lily said. Sometimes, he agreed. 3 weeks later, Victoria Hale established the Slade Scholarship, named not for the name on the marriage certificate, but for the name on the tournament records. The name that had beaten her, the name she'd made it her business to help people forget. The scholarship funded chess instruction for children in underfunded school districts in the city. It was not a grand gesture or a press release. It was a specific, practical, appropriately sized act of a person trying to make a thing right that she couldn't unmake. It didn't restore anything. It wasn't designed to. It was, as these things are when done honestly, simply the next step. Margaret Slade had taught one person chess, and that one person had become 2 people, in the way of things, and one of those 2 had gone and one had stayed. The one who stayed had learned everything. The one who stayed was continuing. Lily started formal lessons in February. Her instructor, a retired tournament player named Gerald Ashworth, 64, famously impatient with students who stopped thinking, told Victoria after the 3rd session that the girl was the most naturally gifted student he'd seen in 20 years of teaching. He didn't know about Margaret. Lily hadn't told him. She played as herself. A girl who thought carefully and moved precisely and understood that the vulnerability was the point. She won her first junior tournament in April, in a community center gymnasium that smelled of chalk dust and folding table metal. Daniel was there. He sat in a plastic chair near the back and watched every game. He'd started learning the names of the pieces, the basic rules, the vocabulary. He was bad at it, genuinely, comically bad, but he was trying, which was the part that mattered. After the final game, when Lily crossed the gym toward him with her small trophy and her composed expression and the one unguarded smile she reserved for moments when something good had happened, he picked her up the way he hadn't since she was very small. And she let him, and she said into his shoulder, "Mom would have liked this." "Yeah," he said. "She would have wanted to play against me. She would have beaten you." "Not forever," Lily said. He sat her down. She was already looking toward the next table, where the next game was beginning, where 2 other children were arranging pieces in the silence before the clock started. She watched them with that look, the focused, patient, entirely present look. She watched them like someone who understood that every opening is a question, and that the whole point of the question is to see what the other person does with it. He put his hand on her shoulder. She leaned into it, just slightly, the way she always did. Outside the gymnasium windows, the April evening was the pale gold of a season beginning not arrived yet, but on its way. The kind of light that promises more light without making it a certainty. They stayed until the last game ended.